Welcome. In this video I'm just going to go over how to configure or set up the AI SMD Plus feature and the AI perimeter protection feature, sometimes called IVS, on an Amiga recorder. Now, in case you don't know what smart motion detection is, it's actually Smart Motion Detection Plus now. This is a type of advanced AI-based analytic. It uses deep learning to analyze the metadata coming from the camera, and it's able to filter out specific objects, in particular human or motor vehicle objects, and excludes all other types of moving objects. And of course, this significantly reduces, almost eliminates false events, which is very good. So it's a lot better than traditional motion detection. And of course, what that means in reality, it reduces a lot of time in reviewing footage. And perimeter protection, sometimes called IVS, it's sort of been relabeled to perimeter protection. That again uses a AI deep learning algorithm, but in addition to the smart motion detection, you're able to create rules in specific areas and target specific areas within a scene of a camera. So for example, you might have an entrance that you want to be alerted when someone comes in or out, or a important piece of equipment that you might want to be alerted if someone goes near, or if someone crosses a particular area of a camera's field of view. That's where you'd use perimeter protection. And again, that significantly reduces false alarms when the AI deep learning is used. And this video, there are other videos covering how to perform a smart search for SMD Plus and perimeter protection. And I'm also going to cover how to create a web link and add it to the new Freedom client software version 3.6, and also how you configure Internet Explorer web browser, and also create a limited user account on the actual recorder. So obviously, to use these new AI features, you need a compatible hardware, which at the moment is either an Amiga AI recorder or an Amiga AI IP camera. And you also need the Freedom Client version 3.6 or higher, and you need to add a web plugin on Internet Explorer. So you will need Windows administrator rights on the PC for this to work correctly. Now, there are a few ways to implement AI. The first is by using an Amiga AI recorder. So this is where the AI is done, processing is done on the actual recorder itself. Another method is to use a fairly new model Amiga non-AI NVR, so the OM-NVR models with a fairly new firmware, and use that in conjunction with an AI IP camera. For coax units, you have to use, it doesn't support AI IP cameras. For coax units, you must use a CVR Pro 4 model, which are the AI models. It's important to understand that there are limitations to all of these methods. How much AI you can do on one channel, for example, and how much overall AI you can do, because it's very CPU intensive. And I'll just go over some of the limitations that you should be aware of and you should understand. Okay. If you look at the list on the screen, you should familiarise yourself with these limitations. So I'll just go over a few. Generally speaking, when the AI is done on the recorder, only one recorder AI function can be enabled at the same time. The only exception to this is usually face detection and face recognition. But if you're using an Amiga NVR, offloading the face detection to an AI IP camera is advisable because it takes the load off the recorder. And just so you know, certain AI features consume more CPU resources than others. So face recognition is the most CPU intensive, then face detection, perimeter protection, then SMD, smart motion detection. So for example, if you wanted to do multiple face recognitions, if the recorder supports it, you may have to reduce your number of other types of analytics. Now with Amiga NVRs, if you're performing an AI search, if you have a relatively new Amiga NVR, you can do an AI search if you have a supporting AI camera, IP camera. And just be aware this the AI search only goes back 7 days for Amiga NVRs. Now if you want to do AI on a BNC recorder or Pentibrid recorder, the Pro 4s for example support AI, and some of them can go back 30 days. But on the CVI units, like the Pro 4s, the AI is done on the recorder, and it does not support AI via IP cameras at this stage. So even if you had an IP camera that was AI, it doesn't support that feature on the CVR units. And also, while still on the Pentibrid units, the CVR units, if you enable the extra IP channels on the unit, it will disable all AI features. So you have to make a choice whether you want extra cameras, IP cameras, or you want AI functionality. And AI functionality on CVR units like the Pro 4 are supported by BNC channels, so not IP cameras. Okay, let's get started with the configuration. Now, just to outline the steps briefly, we're firstly going to add a web link device to the Freedom software. Then we're going to configure our Internet Explorer web browser and install the web plugin. Then on the recorder, we're going to create an intelligent record schedule, a blue color, for each channel that is going to have AI enabled. And then while still on the recorder, we need to create a limited user account for the AI search. And then of course we have to, on the recorder or via the recorder, enable the actual AI feature that we want to use. In this case, we're going to be looking at SMD and perimeter protection. Okay, so let's add the web link device to Freedom. So I've got the Freedom software open. I'm going to go to Setup. You of course need admin rights for this. And I'm going to go to Device Setup. I'm going to click on the plus button here. Now I'm going to call it, it's good to have a naming convention, W01. W is for web link, 01 is, it's the first recorder. If I had multiple recorders, I'd obviously do it a different number. In this case, I'm using the number 1 recorder, and I'm going to call this AI search. And under device type, I'm going to select Amiga web browser, and I need to give it the address of the recorder. And then you need to give it the HTTP port of the recorder. Now it actually says private TCP port at the moment. This is incorrect. It actually should be the HTTP port here, which in my case is 80, but it may be different on yours. You can go into the network menu to find out what port, what HTTP port yours is currently set at. So I'm happy with that. I'm actually going to copy this device name for later, and I'm going to apply it, and if successful, it appears over here and OK. And now I want to click on a device, and you see this little camera appear under it. I actually want to click on that, and I just want to paste that same name for that one, so it actually has the same name. So that's it. We've created our web link, and you'll see over in the right hand camera list here. Now I've got mine in camera only view, but it's often cleaner to have it in camera list only. You can set this by default if you wish. This is under the advanced settings, and you tick this option here, display only camera list. So that's how you would do that by default. Now, so that's the first step we've done, adding the web link. Now we need to configure our Internet Explorer web browser. So I'm going to double click to open the web link. I'm going to double click on this text. And then when the browser is open, we'll click on the cog symbol up the top right here and select Internet Options. Then we're going to click on the Security tab and click on the Custom Level button here. And then I'm going to scroll down about 3 full pages using the mouse. 1, 2, 3. And then we need to select for download unsigned ActiveX controls. We need to change this from disabled to prompt, and the one directly following it, initialize and script ActiveX controls not marked as safe. We need to change that from disabled to prompt. then click OK. Yes, I want to change, and then OK again. And now we can log in to the recorder. Now down the bottom here we've got a prompt to install one of the modules, and I'm going to allow. I'm actually going to allow for all sites. Then I have to log in again, and then to make sure it's all installed, I'm going to click on search. Now again, because this is the very first time I've used this interface, I need to install the ActiveX plugin. So I'm going to click on here to download, and down the bottom here it's asking me, do you want to run? Yes, I do. And I'm going to click run again. Now if this comes up, sometimes what you need to do is actually close your Internet Explorer and click on retry, and that's installed. Now I'm going to have to open it again, and you can tell if the ActiveX plugin has been installed correctly by going to search, and if we can see video, that means it has worked. So that's that step, installing the ActiveX plugin. So now we're going to move on to other settings on the recorder. I'm going to close this, and now our next step is to create an intelligent record schedule for each channel that's going to have AI. Now the way you do that is I'm going to click on the setting button up the top left here, and then click on storage, and then I'm going to click on schedule. Now we recommend a continuous motion and intelligent record schedule. Now I'll just show you, it's already set to green, yellow and blue in my case, but to actually set that I click on the first setting up here. I'm going to select all here for all days unless I want it otherwise, and for period 1 the general's ticked, which is continuous, the motion's ticked, and the intelligent is ticked. So those 3 are ticked, and in my case it's going to be 24/7 record schedule, and I'm happy with that. Go OK, and I'd go OK again to save it. If I wanted to copy that, I'd click on the copy to button and select the channels I wish to copy it to. So that's how you create an intelligent record schedule. Must have the blue. So now I'm going to close this menu by clicking the X up here, or I can click the tab here if I like. So now we're going to create the limited user account for the AI search. So we click on the icon up the top left here, and this time I'm going to select account, this one here. Okay, now we're going to create our limited user account, which I'm going to call search. So I'm going to click on the add button here. I'm going to call it search, and I'm going to give it a password. And we've got 3 tabs down here, system, search and live. Now in my case I have an NVR here. I'm going to untick all, so there's nothing displaying here. Just be aware, if you're dealing with a CVI AI recorder, there is one option you have to tick here, and that's the event. That would have to be ticked if it was a CVR unit, but the NVRs, you do not need to tick that. Now I'll click on the search option here, and I'm going to untick all the cameras that don't have AI, so as not to confuse the end user. And then under live, I'm going to untick all cameras because this is only an AI search, so no live cameras are available. So to recap, under the system, it's actually nothing. Under search, only the AI cameras or channels, and all unticked for live. I'm going to click OK for that, and operation succeed. And we can test our account now by logging out up the top here. Select log out. Then we log in with our limited account to test it. And we see we've only got 2 items here, the search and the AI. That's all we want to see. And just note, for the CVI AI units, you will actually see another alarm menu here, but it's primarily these two that we're interested in. Now it's time to actually enable the AI feature itself for the channel. So there's going to be SMD I'm going to show you in this example, and also perimeter protection. So SMD is quite simple, so I'll just log out and log back in as admin. Now to configure any AI feature, you do it from the AI menu from the recorder. So I'm going to click on AI, and the first thing that opens up is search. We don't want search. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to expose the parameters menu. So under parameters, we want smart motion detection, SMD. So I've clicked here. And to enable SMD on a camera, we first select the camera. In my case, it's going to be number 5. Now, I'm currently using an AI recorder. So depending on whether you're using an AI camera or you want to use the resources of the recorder, this is what this menu here is for, type. So by recorder or by camera. To save resources on the recorder, I'm going to select by camera because channel 5 is actually an AI IP camera, so it supports AI. So again, if you didn't have an AI recorder, you actually wouldn't get the recorder option. You would just see the by camera option on NVRs that don't natively support AI on the recorder itself. So just to try to clarify, the AI processing can either be done via an AI IP camera, or the processing can be done via the recorder if it's an AI recorder. So in my case, as I said, it's going to be by an AI camera. So I've selected by camera, and I simply click the enable and click OK and wait for this message, operation succeeded. Always look for that. Sometimes I click OK a few times if I'm not sure. And the rest is default, so in our case we want human and motor vehicle, and sensitivity medium, we're going to leave that all at defaults. And of course it's on channel 5, it should be recording channel 5, so we never need to usually touch this menu here. Now just one last thing before we go, this cryptic message down here, SMD linkage configuration, synchronizes with MD linkage configuration. What that basically means is, for most of these analytic functions to work, you must have motion detection enabled on the actual camera or the channel, which it should be by default. But if we want to check, we can go out of here, we can go to the alarm menu and video detection in this case, and select our channel and just make sure it's ticked, which it usually is by default, but just so you know, motion detection does need to be enabled for these AI functions to work. Now if we want to test the SMD, obviously we need someone walking past the camera. After a minute or so, we can go in to the AI and do a search. So under AI search, SMD, there is a separate video on how you search SMD. This is just one of the methods. There are actually another method as well using the timeline. We select our channel, our data course, which is today by default, and here I see there are two detections, human detections. I can play the video. So that works. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to create a perimeter protection rule. Now this involves a few more steps than the smart motion detection. Okay, before we get started, I'll just explain the two different rule types in perimeter protection, and these are the intrusion zone, which is usually a box or a polygon like we see at the top left here, or in the car park one just over here. So that's typically used when you have an important object or location that you want to be detected when someone intrudes onto that object, is typically when you would use that type of rule, the intrusion rule they call it. And the other type of rule is the tripwire. In the bottom left one down here, we've got two tripwires, again primarily targeted at people walking along the footpath in this instance. So it's basically used when you want to a trigger to be recorded when someone walks past a particular point or line, if you like. Okay, let's set some of these up. I'll show you how it's done. So to set up the AI, we go into the AI menu, and then under parameters here. Now the first thing we need to do is set the smart plan for IVS or perimeter protection, and this is this option here, smart plan, and we select our channel. In my case, I think it's 4. And then for perimeter protection, we must select the light globe, and it must be highlighted like this. So again, so it is highlighted, IVS is highlighted for perimeter protection. I'm going to click OK, and I see the message, operation succeeded. And now we're going to go down to IVS, so parameters IVS now. We've set our smart plan, and we're going to select our channel again. Now I'm going to show you 2 different methods of creating perimeter protection, AI perimeter protection. Now currently we see the field of view here, and under type we've got AI by camera and AI by recorder. And you have to be very careful and understand where the AI is coming from, or what device is supports AI. In this case, I know this camera does not support AI. Now while I can still create an IVS rule, it's not actually a perimeter protection rule, so it doesn't use AI. And the way you can tell if a camera supports AI, if you don't know the model itself, if I click on the plus and I don't see any of the AI filters, so this camera does not support any AI via the camera, by looking at this menu here. Now I'll show you a camera that does support AI to show the difference. Now this camera supports AI, and the way I can tell here, if I click on the plus, and notice we have our target filters. So if you see this here, the camera is an AI camera, or the recorder, if you selected recorder, and you also seen that by recorder, you'd know you'd have an AI recorder, which I have in this case. If you didn't have an AI recorder, you wouldn't get the recorder option, you'd usually only get the camera option. Just to restate, to use AI, you must see this option here. If you don't see this option, the IP camera isn't an AI IP camera. So in this case, I'm actually using an AI recorder. So, and the camera does not support AI. If the camera did support AI, I would certainly use the camera. That would take the load off the recorder. But in this case, I have no choice, so I must use AI by recorder. And then we simply click on the plus. And now by default, it'll start with a tripwire. If you want a tripwire, obviously you'd proceed. In my case, I want an intrusion zone around the bin area here. So I'm going to double click on that and change this to intrusion. And now we need to draw our intrusion area, which is simply by clicking, left clicking on the mouse to start our line. And I've got my fingers off the mouse at the moment, I'm just dragging the mouse. And if I wanted to stop there, I left click again, and over here, left click again, and left click again, and I want to end around where this box is, so I can actually click there again, and then right click to exit. So the right click exits the drawing option. And if you want to edit your intrusion zone, you can. You do this by selecting the rule. You may have multiple rules, so I'm going to select this rule here, so it's the highlighted one. Then I'm going to click on the blue area, and I see these square intersection points, and if you click and drag on one of those, that's where you can adjust the to a different position. Sometimes, depending on the field of view of the camera relative to the area that you're trying to concentrate on, sometimes you need to give it a bit of room, so a person can you know, it sees the person move into the box, if you like. Obviously, unless the person was in the bin, if I had it too restricted, it may not work the way you intended it to work. So I'm going to give it a bit more area here. So I'm happy with that. Go down. Now I'm going to click OK to save again. And if you look up the top, we get a message, a warning message. It won't allow us to save it. So I'll just do that again so you can see the message. It says please disable SMD first before you can enable perimeter protection. Now, because I'm doing it from the recorder, this is one of the limitations when you're doing it the AI from the recorder. You can only do one AI function per channel on the same channel. So I have to temporarily untick that. And I'm going to go down here under parameters, SMD, and select our channel and untick SMD. I wouldn't have this limitation if I was using an AI camera. You can do both. So that's unticked. Now I can go back to IVS, go to our correct channel, and just be careful. Some people, a common mistake is not changing this. See how it's went back to the AI by camera. We need to select, of course, in this particular instance, AI by recorder, and I'm going to tick our rule, and then I'm going to click OK to save it. And this time, hopefully, get the green. Yes, operation succeeded. So that let me. This is where using an AI camera is more flexible. Most AI cameras support simultaneous SMD and intrusion detection, but when it's by the recorder, you must select one or the other. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click OK again. Now, what I recommend after setting well, almost any AI rules, if you've completed all of them, what I actually recommend is actually restarting the recorder. So I'm going to restart the recorder now. I'm going to go up the top menu and click on reboot. Okay. And I'll pause the video for a bit. Now the recorder has restarted, and the reason why I recommend restarting the recorder after you've changed any AI feature is occasionally while you think you've clicked it or the recorder's clicked it, some other function may have overwritten it. So what I recommend now is actually you check all your settings. So I'm going to go back into AI parameters, and first of all our smart plan. One channel 4, is it still correct? Yes, it is. It's blue. It's got the light bulb symbol and IVS. And is it still correct? Our IVS rule. Now, don't forget, we need to select the appropriate one in your case. In my case, it's by recorder. It may be different in your case. Is the rule still there? Yes, it is, and it's ticked. So that all looks good. So now, of course, we can test our rule by doing a playback. There is a separate video on that, but of course I can do it from here. And IVS search number 4, and we've got a few items here, and I can close this window here. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to create a trip wire. That's where a person or vehicle passes a particular line. An event is created. So let's go into our AI menu here, and we're going to set up. So we need to go to parameters. And again, the first thing we do is check our smart plan. Number 3, and the light bulb is blue highlighted, which is correct. Then we go to IVS, and again it's number 3 I want to set this rule up on. Now again, as previously stated, you need to know whether the AI is coming from the recorder or the camera. One needs to have AI capability to do proper intrusion detection. In my case, I know this camera here is not an AI camera. I can confirm that by clicking the plus, and I see there's no filter option, AI filter for human or vehicle. So I'm going to delete that. And in my case, I am dealing with an AI recorder. So the recorder itself, in my case, is capable of AI processing. So I'm going to select AI by recorder in my case. And I'm going to create my first rule by clicking on the plus. And I want it triggered when a vehicle, or anything actually, or a person crosses this line. So I'm going to start up here. And I've just left click once on the mouse. Now I'm just moving the mouse without any fingers on the actual clickers. And I'm going to stop around here. And I'm going to, I just right click on the mouse to end the line. So I like putting the lines relative to how the camera is angled, if you like. Now by default it's saying A to B. I actually want both ways in my case, so I am going to do both. So I'll trigger on either entry or exit, but that's up to you. And I'm going to leave the rest default, so my target filter is ticked and effective target human and motor vehicle. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to click OK to save. And always look up the top to make sure you get the green OK button, succeeded button. And there it is, operation succeeded. So that's my first rule. And it's a tripwire. I can actually name the rules, although you don't have to. I could call this car park entry. Now let's create another rule. So to create another rule, I can click on the plus again, and this time I want to see someone over the footpath, passing through this footpath here. Now again, I like angling it relative to the actual field of view of the camera. And I don't want to get people on the road. This is one of the benefits of using IVS. Like this is a high traffic area here, and it will continue. If I left it on smart motion section, it would get to a lot of vehicles just traveling in the side road, which I don't want. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click OK. Actually, before I do, sorry, I'm going to change this A to B to both. So either direction. I want it to be flagged, and again I get the operation succeeded. And to see each of the rules, you can click on each of them like that with a mouse. That's how you can see them. It's best not to overlap rules like this, although you can do it. It sometimes doesn't work properly when you do, but you can actually do it. Now I'm going to click OK to save again. And now of course you need someone to walk through the areas to test it. I've previously set this up so I can show you under search, IVS. So that's an example. That's working okay. So I'm going to close that. So that's basically how you create a tripwire. Now in general, sometimes when you're setting up these rules, whether it be tripwire or intrusion detection, you sometimes need to experiment. What produces the best results in your particular camera field of view. just sometimes some things to avoid that may interfere with things. If you have the a line too close to the very edge of the video, sometimes that doesn't produce good results. As I said previously, it's best to have them so you can see an object coming from one of the sides at least. So just take note of that. And another thing too, like anything or any type of surveillance, the quality of the detection requires sufficient light. So at night, don't expect the same quality unless you've got very good light at night with these systems. As far as accuracy, as I said, AI is significantly better than the previous version of analytics, but it's not perfect. Now, the false alarms that we have seen have not been many, but there have been a few. For example, birds, certain animals walking across the scene sometimes are flagged as human. Yeah, it's rare, but I have seen it, particularly with birds. And also if the camera's looking at a large body of water, sometimes the ripples seem to sometimes be interpreted as a human being or something. So if possible, avoid those scenarios. And of course, when it rains, if there is water dripping down the lens of the camera, that will of course produce all sorts of strange ideas. That's why it's best to have use some sort of cover, like a sunshade or a rain shade, and make sure the camera's protected from the direct rain. And sometimes the angle that you have the camera relative to your rule may have an effect, like it might work better or worse at certain angles. Sometimes if it's too steep, it may not work that well. So just take, or if it's too far away. And another false event that we occasionally see is from reflections. Now, technically, a lot of these are not false flags as such, because AI doesn't understand context. For example, if you've got the camera's field of view or the rule close to a reflective surface, like a window or a glass door, sometimes people walking past that are not directly in the line of view are reflected off the windows, and that may of course trigger as a human detection. So in that case you would try to move the rule or the camera or the camera's position to avoid that scenario. Other situations I've seen indoors is someone carrying boxes, and the boxes had images on them of people or vehicles, and they were detected as vehicles or people. Now, I also just want to cover sometimes if you run into troubles and your AI is coming from the IP camera, you need to check the IP camera setting. It's pretty simple, but I've just got an IP camera open here. I'm going to go into settings. Now, most IP cameras support both smart motion detection and perimeter protection if you want to use it at the same time. You don't have to, but under the event option here, and the first thing we check if we've got some options is video detection enabled, and it is, so that's ticked. And smart motion detection, is it enabled? Yes, it's ticked for all events. And if we did have rules set up in the camera itself, you'd obviously check them. In this case, there are none. But if you were supposed to, obviously you would add them here. But normally that can be done via the recorder, via an NVR recorder. So another important element to check actually is a smart plan. If you were running IVS, you have to make sure this is selected, which it's orange on the IP cameras. If I click that again, that's off, and orange is on. Save. So if I was using IVS or perimeter protection, that would have to be highlighted like it is now. Okay, that wraps up the video. Thanks for watching.